just a quick introduction. Who would you say Emily is? How do you pronounce your surname, by the way? Can you see I've been kind of careful in not mispronouncing your surname?
Yeah, it's Eckert.
Okay, Eckert. Okay, that's exactly what I thought it would be pronounced. Because I mean, when it comes to my surname, people always tend to butcher it. So I try not to butcher other people's surnames.
I appreciate that. Yeah. It's funny, yes, you know, who am I? And so I was thinking about the past couple of days and I'm like, well, unfortunately, I can't say I'm the international man of mystery. So what else can I come up with? That's like, so I came up with International Woman of Sustainable Empowerment, which doesn't zing as nicely.
It's still strong though.
But yeah, you know, my story is international. I was adopted. I have a multicultural family, and sustainability has been important to me since I've been old enough to understand what it means, and protecting the planet and making sure that we have a planet that's healthy and strong, that can sustain not only itself, but also humanity, because without the planet, humanity wouldn't be able to sustain itself. And then empowerment, I really love how you mentioned mentorship, because that's part of what I've enjoyed doing most of my life. And I've also dabbled a little bit in neuro-linguistic programming, and I do executive coaching as well. And so the empowerment piece of helping people understand that they are in control, that they have options, and bringing hope back into their lives when they don't have it. And that to me is really important, because if a person feels empowered, they will make a positive impact, not just on themselves, but on everybody around them as well.
Yeah, most definitely. I think one of the most interesting things they mentioned there is in regards to like empowering people to let them know that they're in control. I think when it comes to the conversation about sustainability, we always think that is someone else's responsibility. Because I mean, I've been in that position myself when I was younger, and these conversations used to be brought up about, you know, global warming and, you know, the lack of resources and the overuse of resources. I always thought it was a responsibility that should be bestowed upon those who are in like a higher position of power, or those major industrialists who can actively control these things. But I think more and more we're starting to learn that as individuals, there's stuff that we can do on a micro level, which has major impacts as we go along. And is that some of the work that you're doing in terms of like informing people on those things that they can do?
Yeah, it's so important that we have all key components coming together. So you're right, you know, businesses and political leaders are one aspect on how we can improve our environmental situation. But as consumers and as individuals, we have a ripple effect. And sometimes we don't even know it. I guess the easiest way to, to portray this right now is there are statistics and there's proof that consumer trends are increasing when it comes to consumers demanding socially and environmentally responsible products. And so we are now at a point in history where we have that calculated backing to the fact that as consumers, we make a difference. Because if each consumer chooses a certain product, vendors will see that. Vendors want to thrive, right? Vendors want to be financially sustainable. In order to do that, they need to make sure that they're adjusting their products and their operations to meet what the consumers want, what they're demanding. So yes, and I've also learned that oftentimes what we do in our own lives impacts people that we don't even know it impacts. Yeah. And people are watching us all the time. They may not say anything, but they're watching us and they're hearing us, and they look at our purchase habits and our eating or diet habits and you know, our styles and the words and stories and education and topics that we talk about. And so oftentimes we impact people and we don't even know that we've impacted somebody.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, I mean, having conversations like these and educating others is, I think, one of the most vital parts of the cog here, because there's something interesting I recently learned, and I was kind of blown away by it, and I felt slightly sad. And I was in regards to like food banks. So I used to be an avid believer that food banks are fantastic. So, you know, go donate to food banks. But it's only recently that I understood that also the type of food that you donate to food banks can either have a positive or negative effect on the environment. So foods that they can't store, for instance, for long-term periods, or foods that they don't have, you know, the freezer space to keep refrigerated, that they end up having to dump these foods anyway. So you've got a whole bunch of like major superstores and high street stores that are wanting to donate to food banks, and they end up donating to food banks, but then these foods end up going into the tips and thrown away. Because I recently had an interesting conversation with a gentleman here in the UK called Alan Smith, and he runs like a unique food bank store where, you know, all the food is free for anyone and everybody within the community, as long as you offer some form of services to the organization, whether you help them repair people's homes or do something. So it's an exchange of services for food. And he informed me about this whole underlying issue that many people that donate to food banks don't know, that, you know, it's essential to donate the right types of food that have longevity. And, you know, it was hard hitting because after releasing that podcast, so many people came back to me and they were as shocked as I was, because they thought they were doing something majorly good by just continuously taking all these type of foods into the food bank, not knowing that it was having the opposite effect that they thought it would have. So it's quite vital to have these conversations. But as we're on this subject, Matt, can you tell me a bit about sort of Go Viable, your organization, and how that came about, and what is exactly that you do?
Sure. So Go Viably, it stemmed from my own frustrations of being a consumer and conversations that I've had with small and medium-sized businesses through my various careers. The big vision is 10 years from now, all products are by default socially and environmentally responsible. So as an example, let's say you have two backpacks. One backpack is conventionally produced. So the supply chain is the supply chain that's been around for 20 years. Nothing's really changed. Probably produced in China in a factory that doesn't have great, you know, the indoor environment is not great for the employees. They may not be compensated right. Then you have a backpack that is socially responsible, meaning the people who produce it are fairly paid, compensated for their time. The materials that are used are renewable materials or recycled materials. And if these two backpacks were at the same exact cost, which one do you think most people would choose?
Yeah,
right?
Sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. And so we need to get to that point where the fact that a product is socially and environmentally responsible is a given. It's still considered kind of a luxury. And we need to move past that phase in history and move on to the phase where that's the norm. And Go Viably looks at this as, you know, three key components in the economy: the supply chains, the vendors, and the consumers. And so we help both the supply chains and vendors integrate some of that social and environmental responsibility into the core of their business model, and in a way where it's not just environmentally sustainable, but also financially sustainable. Oftentimes people don't realize, but many updates or changes in habits that a business can do to its operations or to its corporate culture actually also helps the bottom line for the business. And then on the flip side, we're here to provide a sustainable marketplace for consumers so they can have a one-stop shop. I know that's kind of a cheesy saying, but a one-stop shop for pre-vetted sustainable products. And one of the things that I've observed when talking to businesses is it's not that the business doesn't want to do the right thing. Sometimes they just don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to start. With small and medium-sized businesses, oftentimes the owners and CEOs are in depth with the day-to-day operations and don't have time to kind of step back and take a look at the big picture of their business in the future in the next 3, 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
And so, I've looked at, you think about the Googles and the Apples of the world, and they have the resources to have a sustainability department. They have the resources to do the research and development, to change their supply chain, to put some pressure on their suppliers so the suppliers can become more socially and environmentally responsible. And where Go Viably wants to help is to make sure that all businesses have access to that, not just the big ones, but also small and medium-sized businesses, so they're not left out in this transition, and so they can see themselves thriving in the future as well.
Yeah. What would you say some of the biggest challenges when pitching this to businesses in particular? Because I know, I mean, whenever you discuss sustainability to businesses, the main issue or the main worry is always the effect it's going to have on their bottom line, because they're thinking, wow, okay, now we're going to have to spend a whole bunch of money in becoming sustainable and restructuring our whole process and procedures. So how do you tackle that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because as with everything, there's that early adopter curve, right? Early adopters and so on and so on. So there's some businesses we speak to that already understand the importance of doing this, and they hop on board right away. The challenge comes in when a business kind of still has that mindset that transitioning to be more sustainable means by default spending money. Or one of the biggest challenges on a business side and on a consumer side sometimes is you may have to invest a little bit more up front, but throughout that operational cost, you're spending less money. Yeah. So as an example, electric vehicles are probably the easiest to use, right? Electric vehicles, luckily, because of a lot of incentives, they're not that much more expensive anymore. When they started out on the front end, they were more expensive than a fossil fuel vehicle, but you don't have to do oil changes, and you have a lot less maintenance. You don't have O2 sensors, right? And so throughout the lifespan of the car, you're saving money. So sometimes it's a shift in a mindset of how much do I spend now in order to save in the long run. And it's interesting to me because back in the day, people would buy something, and I mean like back in the day, people would buy something and they would keep it forever because they would keep fixing it, right?
Yeah.
And then we transitioned to this economy of, well, if something breaks, I'm just going to buy a new one. Exactly. And now we're in this phase of going back to the original mindset of, well, when we buy something, it needs to last, right? We're investing in something. We can't just have this throwaway economy.
Yeah, that's true. I think one of the things that really helps when it comes, especially nowadays with social media, everything, is that social pressure kind of, we're starting to see more evidence that social pressure pushes government legislation to some extent. So here in London, for instance, you can't drive into the city now if your car emits a certain level of CO2 or whatever, depending on the size of your car engine. So they have something called ULIS charge. So if you're driving into the city and your car is massive, you've got a massive engine, you're going to get charged ridiculous fees. And if you don't pay it, the fines are astronomical. So no one drives into the city no more, unless you have an electric car or, I don't know, a smart car or a small motorbike or whatever. And these are government legislations that came about through social pressures and, you know, governments getting involved. Like, are you working on any sort of lobbying work in terms of like government legislations in pushing forward organizations and corporations to be more sustainable?
I am not. There's other organizations that are, but Go Viably is geared more towards the helping the actual businesses and providing them the knowledge and the tools. Because again, I believe it's important that politics or leadership in politics, as well as businesses, as well as consumers, we all need to come together. Personally, I believe that corporations and companies and businesses have such an amazing platform to be leaders without needing to be forced to be leaders. right? As entrepreneurs, by default, we're leaders. And so let's use that as a positive. Let's use that to make a positive impact and do the right thing, regardless of whether we're being forced to do it or not.
Yeah, most definitely. How is success measured? So how is progress or success measured within the field of work that you do? So how do you know if the organization is now on the right path?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're actually developing a sustainability certification. So what that means is we're going to, or we have built out specific parameters, and we, gather the information from the vendor, and we're going to develop it in a couple of ways, because you can look at success of a product comparing one product to the conventional product. So let's take, for example, well, we can use the backpack example, right? If you have backpack A, which is conventional, and backpack B, which is sustainable, there's a comparison there. Backpack A is kind of the baseline, the conventional is the baseline, and then we can assess how much better is backpack B because of the specific steps or materials that they use or the way that it's manufactured. So part of it is comparing almost apples to apples and seeing which one's more sustainable. The other is, we look at it in 5 different categories. So corporate culture, building, utilities, and management. You have innovation and operations. Then you have the supply chain and the distribution and transportation. And then you have the waste management and the product life cycle. So in each one of those categories, we take a look at what's the baseline, what has been done up until now, and what brings it to that level of, okay, now the impact you make within that category is either neutral or positive impact.
Okay, oh, that's fantastic. I came across a really intriguing innovation most recently. I'm not sure if you come across them. It's the coconut shell wooden pallets. So, when containers are shipped from China across the world and, back and forth, they either use the plastic or the wooden pallets. And there's this organization, I forgot the name of the organization, but they work along the lines of creating sustainable shipping material. And they started using recycled coconut shells from Africa and various countries in Asia. And they were turning them into the wooden pallets. And once they arrived in the countries of import, they would recycle them if they'd been broken, whatever, and continue the chain. And they managed to, I forgot what the gentleman said in the presentation, but I think they managed, the cycle was, I think, 5 years per pallet, whilst before it was one shipment and then nobody knows what happens to this pallet afterwards, and they'll create another wooden or plastic pallet in China or wherever the goods were being shipped from. And I thought that was a great innovation, and I was surprised as to why that hadn't been thought of before, considering that we're supposed to be these intelligent species that are always forward thinking. But I think as we speak about these things more and more people are becoming more innovative, and it's creating more businesses in regards to the sustainable industry. And that was a great one that I found, and I thought I'll share it with you if it's something that you've come across something similar.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. I love that part. Although we're in a crisis, I love the innovative part of getting us out of the crisis. Because like you said, we are an intelligent species. Right. So there's so many people that have so many fantastic ideas, but oftentimes there's comfort in doing things the way they've always been done. Yeah. And because we are facing this environmental crisis, it's one of those pivotal moments, like the Industrial Revolution, where people are realizing we need to bring that innovation above the sea, right? We need to start looking and harnessing that and leveraging that. That's a fantastic example.
Yeah,
with the coconut pallet.
It was a great one that I came across, because I mean, to me, I'm always thinking about the process of pace. So can we keep up the pace that we're currently at? It's like, how plausible is that? How far and how long do we have until this pace can't be kept up and there's no turning back? So that's one of the questions I'm always asking myself. And it's like, I think the pressure needs to be ramped up in regards to being innovative with it, because we can be more innovative, we can be more sustainable. So in terms of like the pace that we're currently producing stuff at, how is it in your research or your findings? Is it, are we above the curve? Like, where are we in terms of like the pace? Are we, you know, is the pushback strong enough? And is the current innovations to change strong enough? Like, what's happening within the field?
Yeah, I'll answer that, but I will tell you statistics. I'm not a statistician, is
Yeah,
that the word? But I know there's a lot of statistics. But
yeah.
regardless of the statistics,
Mm.
if you just look at the amount that we consume and produce and the resources we use, we're doing it too fast. We're doing it too fast. We're consuming too much. And in regards to innovation, I've had conversations. This goes back to your question of challenges with talking to business owners. I've had conversations with business owners where they say, well, but you know, batteries will evolve, and so I'm just going to wait another 10 years until energy storage is, you know, comes down in price, or the technology gets better in 10 years, or whatever the case may be. The important thing is leveraging innovation, at the same time leveraging the positive technology we already have, because we can't wait for the golden egg of technology that will flip a switch and the whole world becomes sustainable. So we need to harness both. We need to encourage innovation. In the meantime, we need to utilize what we already have as best as we can. Yeah. And so for those conversations, honestly, you could just wait indefinitely. Yeah. 10 years goes by and there's always going to be some kind of innovation or change to a product. Maybe not always, but most of the time. Yeah. So at some point you just have to say, okay, what's the best thing that I can do now? And then fine, if 10 years from now something better comes up, then, you know, look at the cost effectiveness of adopting that. But what are you doing now that you can do to improve your situation?
Most definitely. Are you currently working with international organizations, or is it mainly stateside?
International. So actually a couple of my team members are in Canada. Okay. And we also have some partnerships developing in Europe. And so it's definitely an international, because supply chains are international, right? Selling products is international, and we need to make sure that this is a global effort, not a national effort, but a global effort.
Yeah, because the reason I asked that is, do you find that there's differences in culture and the ideals behind sort of like sustainability? Because I mean, I'm originating from Ghana, and when I go to Ghana, the idea of sustainability isn't even a conversation. There's other worries. It seems that, you know, different cultures and different eco-social statuses bring forth different conversations and different worries. So at the moment, and I feel like in order for this to work, it has to be sort of like a global unified front. But where you have different cultures looking at sustainability from a different lens, it becomes a bit of an issue, because, you know, one side might be picking up, but then the other side is dropping. So it's like, where is that balance supposed to be found? Because I've had this conversation before, and it just wasn't a conversation at all to be had in that country in particular, because their worries were completely different. And that's where I think, you know, the global effort needs to be more spread widely.
You're right. You know, it depends on the survival needs, right? And where a specific culture might be. I think a society, community, or culture, that conversation is a little bit different than the belief system. I think there are two different conversations there. I have people that have asked, well, you know, if the US does all these great things, and then there's developing countries which are still using coal, or, you know, still emitting a lot of carbon, or are not creating the same type of commitments that we are. my take on that is, if we have, again, it comes back to leadership. Leadership is about helping everybody and bringing everybody up with you. It's not about you being in the top and doing everything for your own comfort and your own survival. Being a true leader is bringing everybody along. And if we can set the right precedent as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a politician, as whoever, if you set the right precedent, again, goes back to that conversation of the ripple effect. And the people that right now are more concerned about their livelihood of their farm, which is being impacted by a drought, which can be impacted because of climate change, they're more concerned. Those family-owned farms are more concerned with their survival right now. And there's nothing that, other than them surviving and putting food on the table for their kids, I can't blame them for that being their concern, right? Or if their national economy is very weak right now, unfortunately, I can't blame them for wanting to strengthen their economy. I think other people, other countries, other businesses need to be able to show you can strengthen your economy, you can strengthen your business by being socially and environmentally responsible. And this is how you do it, and prove it by doing it and showing it instead of just talking about it.
Yeah, most definitely. I think leadership is always essential, and when you're in that position, it's always essential to show the example by moving forward for a better place. You said earlier on that sustainability has always been something that you was interested in, and something that inspired you to grow your organization and your company. Was there one particular thing that you saw or heard or got yourself engaged in that thought, no, you need to do something about this? Or was it accumulation?
Sorry?
No, so, or was it an accumulation of things that you thought, okay, I need to?
It was, I grew up in Connecticut, which is a beautiful state. And I had a beautiful home surrounded by woods, and we could run around in the yard. And so ever since I was little, I had exposure to nature. And so I've always loved animals. But the moment that kind of blossomed my efforts, I guess, was when I was a teenager. When I was in high school, I worked at a local aquarium. And one of my jobs there was being an exhibit educator. So I was standing there. It was, don't remember what month, but it was a humid, typical East Coast day. I had the tank with the beluga whales behind me. So we had 3 beluga whales there at the time. And I was teaching the audience and the visitors about conservation of animals and beluga whales. And I remember finishing that spiel. And then that light bulb went off of, okay, I'm here and I'm teaching people about conserving animals, but then I go home and eat them. Like it just didn't click. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I understand that you can't just raise a whale on a farm, but still that value, that life is the same, regardless of whether it's an animal in the ocean or an animal on land. So that was the light bulb moment. And then I started being much more active in animal advocacy. But as I researched that, I learned more about the emissions and the environmental degradation that happens because of farming. And I'm sure that my oldest sibling was a vegan for a while, so I had some influence from that as well. But that was kind of the time when I really started to evolve myself as an active participant in it.
Okay, amazing. You just mentioned the animals. So I recently watched Seaspiracy, and it brought forth a lot of questions, and that's why I like documentaries. I'm a lover of documentaries. I'm a lover of information, because there's some things that you might think you have an idea about, or you have a perceived notion about, but then when it comes down to the facts, then it's like, wow, okay, it's completely blown my ideals out the water right now. So I didn't know the impact that eating fish had on other animals, for instance, like, you know, the killing of whales and stuff like that. And watching that documentary completely blew my mind, because the chain is ridiculous and it's crazy when you look at it on a wider scale. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, Seaspiracy. Oh, you haven't seen it? Yeah.
I have not. And I will say, I've done a lot of research myself. And the part of the reason why I haven't watched it is because I know I'd sit there and be crying pretty much the whole movie.
Yeah, I mean, I was in shock for pretty much most of it. And it takes a lot to shock me, because I watch a lot of crazy documentaries. And watching documentary about a fish, that shocks you in terms of when you realize what it takes to put the fish in front of you, and what other animals get killed in the process, and how that has a major impact on the ocean, and eventually is going to have an impact on us as human beings. It's quite intriguing. And yeah, and it just brought the question to me about the chain. It's like we never really think about the chain. We always think about what's in front of us right now. So it's like, you know, I've got this plastic bottle here, but you don't realize what's behind it, and the chain behind it as well. And bringing that to the forefront, I think it's essential in the fight for sustainability, and letting people understand what it actually takes to produce the things that we do produce, and the things that we take advantage of, and we don't necessarily take care of properly after use as well, the aftercare, whether recycling or reprocessing and reusing. And that's one of the essential parts. Is there an educational process to the work the organization does with other companies?
There is. So part of the equation, or this transformation, is adding that extra step of transparency. And that's part of what our e-commerce site will be, or our marketplace will be, in the sense of consumers will now have more transparency into what exactly the businesses they're buying from do or don't do, what kind of actions they have put into place. So it is the first time, not the first time in history, that's not the right way to put it. It has bubbled up that consumers are finally starting to care what happens behind the scenes. We went through this phase that we talked about earlier, where we just kind of keep buying things. When they break, we buy, and we don't really look at what's behind the scenes. And now we're starting to realize more and more people care about what's behind the scenes. And if that's a negative thing, then they'll put their money elsewhere. So yes, part of what we're doing is improving that transparency and learning how to utilize technology to keep track of some of these things, and how we can use technology to share the information with consumers.
Yeah, most definitely. What can individuals do on a micro level, sort of like some of the practical things that we can do to be more sustainable?
Yeah, so a couple things. Probably by far the easiest thing to do is to adopt a plant-based diet. I've been doing it for a long time. This brings into the conversation how I mentioned before that belief systems can be a challenge. So I grew up in my mom's side of the family is from the Czech Republic. So I did get that from my parents. I grew up in this multicultural family, and so I could look at things from different perspectives and different cultures. But my grandmother has a really hard time on that side understanding why, because that's what the culture, it's rooted in a heavy meat-based diet. But again, all the research and science is out there that farming animals has one of the largest negative impacts on the environment. And so that's an easiest thing. If you're looking for an idea that's very low cost money, you're spending food on anyway, look at what type of food you're consuming. Second thing we can do is be more diligent with recycling. So recycling can be tricky because there are certain things that people think you can recycle, but you can't recycle. So just like you mentioned with the food shelf, recycling can be one of those challenges. If you can't necessarily recycle a cardboard container if it has a wax coating on the inside. Yeah. Or if you have a plastic bottle and it has a plastic wrapper on it, really you should take that wrapper off and separate it. Or if you have a notebook and it has the little metal spirals, you want to detach the spirals from the paper. So being more conscientious about how you recycle. Most people at this point recycle. So being a little bit more diligent on how you recycle. And oftentimes the best resource is just to reach out to your waste management company that you have there, or your municipality, if it's the municipality that's doing it. And anything you can do within your home. Within your home, you have the option to choose LED lights, and those are very energy efficient. And you can look at things when you paint your walls. What type of wall paint are you using, right? Is it zero VOC, which is better for the environment, but it's actually better for us too, for the indoor quality and the indoor environment, not having as many chemicals off-gassing. And then last one I'll throw out there is whenever you can buy something used that somebody doesn't need anymore, it's so important to lengthen the lifespan of a product as long as you can. So oftentimes you'll hear a conversation of what uses more resources, a paper bag or a reusable shopping bag. The reusable shopping bag might use more resources, but you can use it for, I've had mine for over 20 years. You can use them for a really long time. Yeah. So making sure that if you buy something, that you buy it and it lasts a long time and you use it as long as you can. If you don't need it anymore, sell it or gift it to somebody that can use it.
Yeah, that's an amazing bit of advice, actually. So, I mean, I come from a family where our diet is heavily meat-based. And it's only recently my mind's been changed slightly from watching tons of documentaries and reading loads and having conversations with people that have kind of highlighted the impact that it's having not only on myself, but also on the environment. So I cut down so I only have meat between Monday and Fridays. Now Saturday and Sunday, no meat whatsoever, plant-based. I had my first plant-based McDonald's about 2 weeks ago. I was on the motorway. I was on a road trip on a long journey to go and pick up something. And I stopped by one of the service stations and I was starving. And there was only McDonald's that was open. So I was just about to buy fries, but then I realized they had a plant-based burger there. And it wasn't too bad, actually. And I was messaging my boys and being like, oh my gosh, I'm about to have a plant-based burger. I can't believe this. And it's like we have these weird preconceived notions that it's going to taste bad and it's going to be horrible. And, it's not meant for us. And I had to buy into it. I was like, this burger is actually okay. It tastes like a burger. I mean, it's all mental. It's all in the mind as well. So it's like a lot of changing mindset and education plays a major part, because had I not been informed by all the individuals I'm speaking to and all the various outlets and documentaries I'm watching, I would have ended up buying a Big Mac at the service station. But now I'm gradually changing and I'm gradually coming around to it. So at least I've cut down from 7 days worth of meat to 5 days worth of meat now. And, we see where that goes. So I think education is vitally important. It's been important for my journey, and I hope it's important for other people as well, and they get to pick something up from these conversations that we're having. But going forward, what's happening with your organization in terms of its vision for the future? What are some of your plans that you'd like the audience and my listeners to know about?
Sure. So the most exciting plan is this year developing the sustainable marketplace. So it'll be an online marketplace. And to me, that's exciting, because I've had the frustrations of researching different products and spending 30 extra minutes or an hour extra or even longer, making sure that I have the product that I want in a sustainable version. So that will be a big milestone, is to be able to share a platform with consumers where they can be confident in the products. And then the other goal is to impact at least 150 businesses this year in them developing their social and environmental game plans for the future.
That's amazing. I look forward to that. And I mean, it's been a pleasure having you on. I wanted this to just kind of be like an introductory to some of the work that you do and why you do it and the reason why it's important, because I think it's great to share this type of knowledge and then have people start thinking about it. I think the thinking process is always the most important, because the thinking process has been the most important for me in terms of the way I see things now. Like, as you talked about reusing stuff, it's like, I try not to shop much now. In terms of clothing, I shop for clothing maybe once a year, and that's if I'm going on a major holiday and I don't have any any shorts to take with me and so forth. And this all comes from the education that I've gained from having conversations. It's like, throughout the year, why do I need to buy 20 pairs of jeans for when, you know, I just need one pair of blue ones and the black ones, and then I'm good for until one of them rips or something happens and I need a new pair.
Yeah.
So all that advice is essential in sort of like, because I believe that micro actions is great. It's great to teach people about micro actions, because sometimes we're kind of inundated with all these big ideas and big things in terms of how we can all change the world and how we can all become better and more sustainable. And it becomes a bit too scary when you look at it from such a massive scale, and it looks like a big job that you can't handle, which was what I was explaining before. I used to always think that, you know, it's to be left for those who are building and making stuff, and really and truly I'm contributing to that by, you know, taking small micro actions. So how can I do that in the opposite way that can benefit the planet as such? So I really appreciate the advice and really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing that. And I'll definitely want to catch up again and we delve in a bit deeper and talk further about some of the work that you're doing, and also some of the other projects that you've got coming up as well. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'd like to thank you for coming on LetsDoHumans podcast.
Thank you. I love having these conversations. I appreciate the questions you asked, because that's part of it, is going back to that idea of empowerment, is empowering people to ask questions, not to just accept what has been around because it has been around. So I appreciate you asking the questions and helping get the information out there. This has been really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, appreciate that. What you